My name is Jeff Wallace, and I'm the Director of Campus Ministry at GMercyU University. Thank you for clicking on the video for Allyship, Limits, Demands, and Opportunities. We were joined by three panelists. First was Bethany Welch, former Executive Director of the Aquinas Center, a part-time lecturer at Rutgers University Camden in Urban Studies, and the current Justice and Peace Fellow for the Conference of Major Superiors of Men. The second was Candace Williams, a second-year Master's of Science in Occupational Therapy student and the current co-chair of the Student Occupational Therapy Association's Committee for Occupational Justice. Finally, our third panelist was Iyana Brown, a senior occupational therapy student and president of the Black Student Union at GMercyU University. You're going to be joining us right at the beginning of our conversation when Bethany Welch was contextualizing the term allyship within the area and field of higher education. The discussion lasts about 50 minutes. Thanks again for tuning in. Take care.
And so if you think about the term now ally in this context where it's used for racial justice, that's where it starts to take on a little bit different turn, because very often outwardly there are symbols or colors of skin, et cetera, where people say, oh, okay, well, I'm not necessarily identifying you with this particular group. Something else that happens along the way, particularly in higher education in the early 2000s, is this emphasis on community service and then service learning. And so we know kind of that there's these social goods, right? And there's this social contract, and we want to be about each other. We want to be there for each other. But one thing that starts to happen is we start to kind of look for points, right? And ways of recording and measuring service and our investment in the common good. And that can backfire. And I think that's where we're seeing some of the limits. That's one of our titles for tonight's conversation. One of the limits on allyship is that it has turned a little bit performative in the same way that community service turned performative, right? And so I worked for, probably almost 15 years now with high school and college kids who come to the quote inner city, right, to help poor people and get credit, and then they can graduate and life goes on, and they might not ever plug back into any of the systems ever again, right? And so I think that's where we want to be careful and start to think, intentionally about the term of ally. Is it really that I'm with, alongside, and for you? Or is it that I showed up like I did for my community service and I put a black square and I, did hashtag BLM and my pride flag, and then I walked away? And so I think that's just, that context from the 80s to the present. There's some really powerful moments where people did show up for each other. But there's also moments where it, was compromised because we're humans, right? And we kind of make these mistakes. So thinking about allyship, again, person to person versus in larger institutions, it can look like sort of different things. So we just wanted to provide a little bit of that context for our conversation.
Thanks for that, Bethany. And I'm always floored by just the amazing breadth of your knowledge. That I just feel like I learned so much in that 2 to 3 minutes that you just spoke. So I really, really appreciate you giving us all of that context. And you did mention the word limits, and for those who are following along, our three titles are limits, demands, and opportunities. And so I wanted to kind of open it up with our focusing on limits. And so Bethany, you said, there are kind of limits when we talk about allyship, and I guess Iyana or Candace, in your experience with working towards anti-racism, racial justice in your own contexts, what limits have you seen or witnessed from allies, in terms of boundaries, in terms of maybe people taking a step that maybe they shouldn't have taken? So either of you, if you wanted to share some thoughts around that.
Well, I'll start. I will definitely talk about the subject of boundaries because in May and June, as all the Black Lives Matter and Russell's unfolding and George Floyd's murder became national headline, I was receiving a lot of calls from well-meaning white friends. Full disclosure, I grew up in a very predominantly white suburban neighborhood. So I'd received these calls from white friends, and I think there was a mandate on social media that week to check in on your Black friends and make sure they're okay, and also ask them what you can do to become a better ally. And I think people really need to be cautious about what they read on social media, because that is a very sensitive conversation that not a lot of people have the skill to start properly within their friendships, within their relationships. And so I had a friend call me and she said something along the lines of, well, what would you have me do? You know, with all the resignation in her voice. And I'm like, oh, you're tired. Oh, that's nice. You know, I'm here scared for my life because I have a little bit more melanin in my skin than everybody else around me. And you're resigned to, you know, your post as an ally. I also had a lot of friends that are well-meaning that were calling me and just pouring on their guilt, you know, about their own ignorance in terms of what was going on and what's been going on for hundreds of years in this country. And so I'm being put in a position of not only being a teacher, which I didn't ask for, but also being a counselor and being asked to absolve guilt in the middle of my own grief and my own pain and my own fear. Like that's not a burden that you want to put on anybody. So what I would suggest is please don't rely on social media for all of, you know, the information that you're getting about being an ally. There's a lot of misinformation out there. A lot of it is coming from well-meaning sources, but, you know, please take time to look in the mirror first, you know, situate yourself and understand that if you are reaching out to somebody, the first thing you want to do is ask how they're doing. You don't want to be pouring in your own grief and your own feelings and everything. Just take a step back from your own emotions and be there for that person and listen more than you speak. So definitely set that boundary for yourself. If you're going to reach out to a friend of color and you're realizing that they might be in a sensitive situation, you know, put your own emotions aside and really be a listener in that situation.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Candace. And Iyana, I kind of see you nodding a little bit. Maybe that's the video, but is there some resonance there for you?
Yes, I experienced the same thing over the summer. Like, my white friends is like, oh, how do you feel? Like, I'm angry. Like, what do you think I feel? I'm upset. Like, and I know it comes from a good place. It's just that it's awkward for me too. And I know it's awkward for them, but I know the meaning as well. And I don't know how to take certain things. It's like you said, like the white guilt, like, oh, I didn't know this was happening and I don't know what to do. And it's just like, I can't hear that right now. I have my own pain that I'm going with. So you need to use Google and go figure things out for yourself. I'm not an educator. I can only do so much. I don't have a PhD or a doctorate degree in African American studies. I can just show you my own experiences. So you have to take the initiative to go figure things out for yourself. And like, social media is not a great place to get your information. Like, if I see something on like some information about the news, I go and check and make sure that it's credible source. I'm not just going to take it and run with it. So being able to educate yourself, and also with the conversation of boundaries, I learned that like some things just make me uncomfortable. Like, a girl posted the other day, like, well, Black people need to go vote. Excuse me? Like, I just feel like that's overstepping boundaries. Like, that's something that we focus on ourselves. That's something that you should not be posting as a white woman. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's just very uncomfortable saying, well, Black people need to go vote. Who are you to go tell me what we're supposed to be doing? I just feel like it's uncomfortable, and there's certain boundaries that you need to understand that you cannot overstep. Even though we know you mean well, you need to just take a step back and be like, is this okay for me to say? Is this a boundary that I'm overcrossing? And I feel like certain people don't know where their boundaries at. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, both of you, for that. And just, you know, as a well-meaning white person, guilty. I hear that, and the things that resonate for me are the ideas that, Candace, you said, like keeping my own emotions in check and being there for you, which I think Bethany kind of gets at, this idea of performative allyship, you know, like this, oh, you know, I'm going to do the social media, I'm going to put up the black square, but then after that, what's next? And so, you know, in some ways there seems to be an attitude associated with that. At least that's what I'm kind of picking up. I don't know if you wanted to respond to that insight, Bethany.
Yeah, I think attitude, certainly attitude of the heart, right? Attitude, like check your motive, you know, kind of check yourself. I think, you know, if you're in an authentic relationship with a person of color, that's already gonna be part of your week. Like, you're not gonna have to do a separate check-in, right? Because you're going to see them on Tuesday when you go out for dinner, or they're gonna be on your Zoom chat, or they're in your, you know, and I think I have like 4 group chats going, right? They're gonna be in your group chat. It's not gonna be a separate thing. If it's separate for you, then I would say, 1, why is it separate for you, right? Like, why aren't there Black folks in your life? But two, if there really aren't, and that's a reality for some folks, what is the right space then? You know, it's not emailing. So I'm a professor, right? It's not emailing all of my students who are Black and saying, is it, you know, are you okay? It might be acknowledging at the start of class, there's a lot going on. And if you need to take a step back, or you need to, you know, not contribute to this conversation on policing in class today, that's fine. And then maybe, you know, face to face, off to the side, say, anything else, you know, I can do to support you. But I think, you know, like, I think we kind of know, but then we get nervous, right? And we get like, oh my gosh, I'm supposed to do something. And so I think in terms of allyship, this idea too, we often, we had this conversation, Iyana and I, earlier this week when we were planning about, you know, being a voice for the voiceless versus passing the mic. And so often I think, particularly in our faith-based spaces, I would say I was certainly raised with that, like the do-gooder missionary mentality of, oh my gosh, these people have never been heard from, and I just have to like be the voice for them. And then as my evolution, right, and my change has taken place, I recognized people have been talking since the beginning of time. They don't need me, Bethany, to be the voice. They do maybe need me to say, hey, you know, we should probably have on this, you know, conversation or at this table with us, people who are actually affected by what's happening, or, you know, that should be the speaker. The number of times I would say in the last 5 years where I've turned down a speaking panel, like a panel or a presentation, because while I might study the topic, it's not my lived experience. I think that's really essential, right? So that idea of, you know, shifting your whole frame of reference from being that voice to passing the mic will start to help you recognize when it's like not authentic and when it is authentic.
Yeah, and I think that leads kind of into our second kind of title here, which are demands. And you know, I'll just open it for anybody to respond to this, because you know, we did have a little planning conversation before, and in this topic of you know, what are the spaces here, authentic versus performative? I think when we get into that conversation of authentic allyship, we have to get necessarily into the conversation of, well, what does it take for myself, a well-meaning white person, has been said, to be an authentic ally? And you know, in my experience, I know it has taken a lot of my own kind of laying down of the fact that, you know what, I benefit from inherently racist system in the United States. And, you know, I'm bicultural myself, but my outward look is very white. And so I guess, you know, and this is kind of a leading question, but well, I'll just say the statement and get some responses to it. In some ways, allyship requires sacrifice. Mm-hmm. Like as somebody and as a white person, like it requires me to cede my privilege and pass the mic, as we were just talking about. So any of our panelists want to respond to that or toast on that, whatever.
So the question about demand, what it demands, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So basically, like, is it, I guess to put it in a question form, is it required for allyship to sacrifice parts of ourselves as white people in order to like lift up others? I think is the question.
I think I'm not sure I would use the word sacrifice. Mm-hmm. I think you have to really be introspective and see and acknowledge your privilege, but you're also, in order to become an authentic ally, you really need to look at how you were brought up, how, you know, the circles that you run in. You have to look at the workplace that you work in, and you have to see what you haven't seen before. See, I walk into a room and I'll notice that I'm the only Black person there, whereas you have the privilege of walking into a room and not noticing that there's nobody of color there. You really have that privilege. And, you know, it takes a lot of really starting with yourself in the mirror, saying, what can I do to change my ways? Maybe it is a sacrifice. Maybe it is sacrificing those friendships where that person is constantly using the N-word and they're not stopping, even if you're calling them out on it. Maybe it's, you know, noticing in your workplace that there are no people of color being represented. And you might be sacrificing a position or a certain status to speak up about that, you know, with the people in power. You know, within education, and I've had to have several conversations this summer about, you know, the term Black Lives Matter and why that matters to me, why it matters that allyship is given context and not just, you know, oh, we care about all people and all races and that. No, you need to talk about Black people. Black people are being disproportionately affected at this time in this space. So if there's a sacrifice to be made, it's of old ways of thinking and, you know, outdated modes of, you know, interacting in the world. Like, you can't afford to just shut your eyes and feel that your privilege can protect you. You have to be looking out for the people around you.
Other panelists, feel free to respond.
Going with Candace said, I totally agree with everything that you said. I like going into the room, I noticed that I'm the only Black person there. And then like having teachers have me like the education in the room, how do you feel about slavery? Or do you think white men are still in power? Being told to me in class, and I have to advocate for myself. And then other white people seeing that who are supposed to be allies, not checking that or have my back for me. Like you said, sacrificing, you're going to have sacrifices of letting that friend go that continues to use the N-word. Like, why would you want to be associated with somebody that makes you uncomfortable, but you don't want to do nothing about it? So just being able to like check your friends, like being able to say, you shouldn't be able to say that, you shouldn't say that, because by not saying nothing, you're not really an ally. You're just using your privilege to be out of the way. And you can't be you can't be in the middle with this. There's no way it's, oh, I can do this with my friend, and when I'm with my Black friend, I do this. No, either gonna be with us the whole time or don't be with us at all, because we don't need somebody in our corner who's not really there for us, or who doesn't want to be there or take the initiative steps to be there for us.
Yeah, and I think something that I've seen happen a lot is the unlearning, right? So, you know, I'm a nerd. I love to read, and I think, you know, the amount of time you need to spend to unlearn what you thought you knew is tremendous. And it's probably going to need to happen with a book list from folks that you want to learn about, but then you do it on your own. So I'm not, you know, reading Stamped and then going, or How to Be an Anti-Racist, and then grabbing my Black friend and sitting down and being like, let me unpack this with you, right? I'm going to look for what we call an affinity group. So in you know, cultural studies, we'll talk about affinity groups. BSU would be an affinity group. Like, there are days when BSU needs to have a BSU meeting with just Black folks, and that's okay, right? And white folks need to recognize that too. Like, I can't put my oh my gosh moments on my Black friends who have been literally living this every day of their entire lives. They don't take off their skin and they go to bed, right? Like, that's where the conflict around blue lives comes up, is you're not born blue, you put on a blue uniform to go serve, you take it off at the end of the day. So I think something for me, again, is the unlearning. I think the making mistakes, recognizing you will absolutely make mistakes, because it's a very human and probably one of the most fragile things the United States is dealing with right now, right? Because it touches every aspect of our humanity and of our systems. And then I think the other piece is, I'm just trying to think of how to say this. Like, I resonate more the demand for solidarity, because that's my Catholic tradition. I became Catholic, so I joined the Catholic tradition. But the idea of like a deep way of being alongside someone, that to me has a gravity and a weight to it that requires the internal work Candace is talking about. And so it is, you know, confronting family members of mine who for years have said things that I've said, not appropriate, not okay, please stop. And then it wasn't until I like was fostering a young woman of color that suddenly my family was like, oh, this isn't abstract. This is real. This is someone we see, we care about, we want to support. And so I think, again, like the unlearning, the decentering of yourself, and then the ownership of some of those mistakes, and then, you know, doing the internal work to step back from that. I think those are the demands. They're not lights, you know, they're not, if I could just figure out social media and which post, I'll be fine. It's a really deep work.
Yeah, and just quickly to mention, for me, like, I've certainly had to be comfortable with making mistakes, because I'm very excitable and excited, and I want to jump right in. And sometimes I can kind of put my feet in front of myself and fall on my face. And I think for me, it's that dosage of humility, again, to use kind of from the Catholic, you know, humility and understanding that I am not perfect and I'm not going to get this right, but it is better for me to mess up and try than to not show up at all because of my own desire for being the perfect whatever. And also, you know, I think in terms of solidarity, which obviously I resonate with, I think is doubly important to really, again, get back to that idea of, I am with you. I am not doing it for you. We are together and we are bonded as well. And I think that kind of, this is great. I mean, it's all kind of flowing together, which is excellent. And this, I mean, and this kind of takes us into our opportunities piece, because, you know, we've kind of established, I think, this attitude about allyship that is, you know, if we're looking for something more authentic, it's not necessarily about sacrifice. It's more about solidarity. It's more about listening, passing the mic. And it's more about just trying to shut ourselves off as white people to lift up other people's voices and allow them to speak for themselves, you know, and do our best to do that. So I guess, you know, some of the questions I have here, you know, just in general for anyone in the group, in our panelists, you know, do you have a positive experience of allyship? What did that look like? Are there any situations that you can talk about where you felt supported, or you could point like this was a good example? And then I guess more specifically for the Gwynedd students, how can we do that here? Like, you know, obviously, like, not saying, oh, because you're two Black students, you know, but like, you know, from your perspective, just as in your lived experience, what are your ideas on that? So I know that was a lot. I apologize, but
No, that's
feel free to
fine.
jump in and kind of talk about
That's
all
fine.
that.
And the difference is that I volunteered to be on this panel. You
Yeah,
didn't
I
just
guess
call
that's
me
true.
up and just, like, demand solutions. Like, there's a difference. There's a
That's
difference.
true. Okay.
But I think Gwynedd Mercy is taking some great steps in the right direction. I mean, I was very encouraged to see that there's going to be an assistant VP for diversity, equity, and inclusion. And that's a great step in the right direction. Having these vigils, having these talks, these difficult conversations on allyship, and, you know, how we can decry racial injustice, that's a great first step. Being involved, you know, I don't want to just advocate for the Black community. I'm joining the Pride Alliance. I'm going to be part of Disability Pride. You know, all of these things, we really have to keep our eyes open, because there's opportunity everywhere. You know, no matter what situation we're in, no matter what setting we're in, there's always going to be somebody that might be treated just a little bit differently. And if you can take the time, come out of yourself, be there for them, the opportunity will present itself to you to become an ally and to just learn something new, and, you know, to expand your ability to be compassionate and sensitive to the needs of others.
Thank you for that. That's, yeah. No, I think that, you know, and for the context, and maybe for, you know, like Pride Alliance and disability, well, Pride Alliance was something that was around and then went away and then came back recently. But yeah, I think that involvement piece, you know, being around on campus and really expressing that outwardly and saying like, look, I am here and this is what I advocate for. I think that's a really good kind of practical way to do it as well. Iyana or Bethany, have anything to add in terms of either of those questions? Again, they're, you know, experiences of positive allyship, or for Iyana, I guess, you know, how can we promote more positive approaches to allyship on campus?
Like Candace said, getting involved. We have so many clubs on campus, you know, that are like about advocating for people with different things that's going on, like Black Pride Alliance, disabilities and stuff like that. Just being involved and trying to see what they're doing, and even like reposting something on everybody's social media, or registering to go see what they're doing in their events. Going to a meeting is just the bare minimum you can do. Like as teachers, like in classrooms, I have seen where white students have spoke out about certain things and the teachers have done nothing, to just sat there and just let it slide. And as an educator, you shouldn't let it slide. Like, you're supposed to be somebody that we view as somebody that's like higher above us, and you're just letting it slide like it's okay when it's really not. So being able to check the students, and as well as like even talking to us. Like, I know a lot of Black people on campus that feel like they're invisible, like especially in classroom settings, especially when they're the only one in there. Why are they invisible? Why are they not being, why do you not know their name? Why do you not know how to say their name correctly? Why are you not talking to them? You know what I'm saying?
It's always that Black kid or that Black girl or that Black boy. Yeah.
Just having a conversation with them, getting to know your students, and like showing that you care, because you care can go a long way. So that's how I see it, you know, just supporting us as well as educating yourself. You guys know so much stuff about different aspects of life. Educate yourself on like stuff that's happening now that's important to your students now. So just doing certain things like that can just go a long way.
So I'm going to apologize by saying that my neighbors are playing with the little snaps that you throw and explode. So if it sounds loud, that's what it is. They're having fun. I want to just think about a couple things as an educator. So something I think about a lot is the difference between like individual action and structural change, right? And I don't want the allyship piece to get muddied, especially if we do have faculty or administrators on the session. There are things as an educator, as a professor, as a dean, you just need to be doing because you have Black students, period, right? Like, it's not about being a nice person or I'm a great professor. This is your community of learners. And so there's just a moral, ethical mandate to do right by them as an institution. Then within your own sphere, something like I spent most of the summer doing was the conversation around decolonizing the syllabus, right? So I looked at the syllabus that I had inherited from last semester from a different professor. Every single reading was from someone who was Anglo, white, and was male. So, you know, it took rewriting an entire class from the beginning to find, okay, if this is a, you know, kind of a core piece of the curriculum, so in urban studies, like Jane Jacobs is the person, a white woman, great. Is there a Black female scholar who has written in response to Jane Jacobs? I can pair those readings up. I'm not saying I'm going to, you know, throw out the canon and somehow rewrite urban studies tomorrow, but can I have those two in dialogue with each other? So that's one thing as a faculty member. The other thing are more what we think of as like our voice or own voice assignments. So are there ways for your students to complete an entire assignment from their perspective, from their lived experience? And so in one of the classes I'm teaching, we're in Intro to Urban Studies, the students are going to be working on monuments for the whole semester. And the end of the semester, the final project is them designing their own monument for the city of Camden. But we'll spend the semester thinking about all the different challenges and complexities around who represents us, right? Who has power in the public space. But the end of the assignment is not, you know, quizzing them on where are Confederate monuments and where are, you know, Boston Tea Party monuments, but them designing something that could represent their own desire for Camden. So I think, again, I think there's a structural component that's non-negotiable, and then there's your personal, you know, space in your sphere. So a student that comes to VSU is going to be different, you know, allyship, their allyship will look different than a professor, right? And on and on and on from campus ministry, et cetera. So I think that's where the opportunity is. I think it's exciting, but I think it's, again, it's a deep and heavy work, right? It's a responsibility in this moment.
Yeah. No, thanks. All three of you I feel like have just been very candid and honest and open with us. And I really, really appreciate all of that. As all of you were talking, I did open up the chat feature to type your questions to me directly. I will be filtering them through to our panelists to answer. And, you know, just to pick up on that structural versus relationship, and also just to acknowledge what Candace said, you know, and I don't know exactly when, but soon, you know, that AVP for diversity, equity, inclusion will be a part of our community. And I think, you know, we are starting to move towards those structural pieces, as you said, Bethany, that, you know, through a lot of different ways, we're trying. And again, I think it goes back to the conversation of trying more so than doing nothing. You know, we could also have chosen to just, you know what, this isn't something, but I think hopefully as a community where we collectively are starting to understand that there is so much that we can do on a structural level to make a difference for all of our students. So here we go. I won't say names, I'll just say the questions. I don't think anybody else can see but me who's typing me questions. So I'll just say the questions. So one question, and this is an interesting intersection, and I think it's a good question for all of us. I want to be an ally, but I am autistic. Is there a sensory-friendly way for me to get involved? So any of the panelists, feel free to jump in with any thoughts.
A sensory way, that's very interesting. Uh, well, I'll take a crack at it because we do learn about autism. I've worked with autistic children, shadowing an occupational therapist. I would say come bearing your gifts. The autism community is very well known for being able to contribute all sorts of art. And I'm an artist at heart. I will always be an artist at heart. So come bearing your gifts. Like if you write, share your writing, you know, open up your heart and paint, sing, you know, their pain and your struggles and your trouble, and trust that it's going to meet the hearts of the people that you're intending it to meet. And don't be afraid, like we were talking about, there's no such thing as a perfect ally. We're all imperfect people. So, you know, you come as you are and trust that, you know, however you'd like to express your allyship, it's going to be received by the right people in the right way.
Any other panelists want to, thank you for that. That was great. Any other panelists want to respond?
The only other thing I would add is, you know, at least people in my life who I would identify as autistic have just an incredible curiosity and passion for a specific, maybe a narrow focus. And so, you know, if there's a line of reading or theory or news that you can really follow and trail and really become, you know, knowledgeable about, that then is a gift you bring to the rest of the communities you're in relationship with. So like I've been spending more time thinking about prosecutorial discretion and extrajudicial killing, right? These are two radically crazy, huge systemic issues in criminal justice that take a ton of reading and a ton of education. They're not, you know, the sound bite that you're going to get on Instagram. And so if that is an aspect, I don't know for you personally, the question, if that applies to you, but I would say that you know, some of my experience, it could be just developing a rich and thoughtful understanding of a particular nuance that is touching in the issue of racial justice.
Excellent. Did you want to add anything, Iyana? Are you good? You good? Okay, cool. So here's another question. And I won't, yeah, I'll kind of frame it a little bit, kind of filter it a little bit. So the statement, people like, I don't see color. So on the, yeah, so on the spec, so what is that, I guess, are there positives or negatives to that? And what is, if it's just like completely negative, like what is the more appropriate approach or understanding that should be reached? Yeah, so I just want to throw that out there for any of our panelists to discuss.
I'll start.
Okay.
When I hear that statement, I think of negatives and I also think of positives. I think of negatives as seeing like me as a whole person without my color, which is a positive. Like you see me for who I actually am. I'm more than my skin. But also you need to see what comes with my skin. You need to see the white privilege that you have, and you need to see the stuff that I take on as being a Black woman. Because me being a Black woman is going to be different from you being a white man. So you need, like, I see pros and cons with it. That's just my intake on it. So it's for positive, you see me as who I am, but you need to see my color too, because my color comes with the police brutality. My color comes with many different things that I face as being a Black woman. So it's pros and cons with it. So you have to take it for what it is.
Any other thoughts?
Yeah, I think Iyana is absolutely right. I mean, I had a friend who was proudly saying that she didn't see my color, and it made me so uncomfortable because I realized that her acknowledging that I was a Black woman would probably change the dynamics in our friendship and was making her uncomfortable. So it is tough. There are pros and cons to I don't see color as a concept, but generally speaking, I just think it's better if we just acknowledge who we are and we accept each other as we are. You know, we don't have to hide ourselves. We don't have to say, oh, you know, I don't see your color, so that means everything is fine. Like, I see your color and I love you. End of story. You know, it doesn't have to be any more, you know, complicated than that.
Yeah. Bethany, do you want to contribute?
Yeah, I think I'll just add, working in, you know, right now we're talking about a binary, kind of a Black-white binary. I think when you move into incredibly diverse multicultural spaces and particularly multilingual, you know, saying you don't see something like that, you don't see a distinction or uniqueness or richness, I mean, I think you lose. I think whitewashing is real, and I think you lose the richness in which we were created. And as a person of faith, that there's a creator that we're in relationship with, and a creation that we're in relationship with, and I think you miss it. So, I love like botanical gardens and arboretums, and if I were to go and say every flower looked the same and every tree at the arboretum is the same, I'm losing out, right, on all that nuance and all that to celebrate. So. I don't think it's a good thing. I think we need to move past it. But again, I'm saying that as a white person, and I'm gonna just own, the perspective that I bring.
And just to add, for those of you theology heads out there, it's really maybe just me. I think this also comes up in a corollary with interfaith work. Sometimes it can be very easy to say, oh, well, we all believe in the same God. And that's fine, but, what about Islam and Judaism and Buddhism and Baha'i? Like, there are so many different avenues and ways in which people understand the divine that I think when it comes to that type of work, it's important to say, Judaism is beautiful because of XYZ, and Islam is beautiful as well. And we all can contribute to one another from our unique perspectives as religious people. So just to put that out there. We got a few positive comments. One reason I chose Gwynedd was because of the inclusive environment. I am so glad there's an opportunity to talk about this topic. Thank you. We have somebody who feels very blessed to be part of this community, that wants to do better and make a difference. And then definitely somebody wrote and very nicely and vulnerably, I really struggle with how to be a true ally, but the discussion that we've had shows some challenges, and this person was expressing their really deep gratitude for all of the panelists' honesty as well, for everything that they shared. So thanks for that. The chat box is still open for a few more minutes, but while we're waiting for a few more questions, I guess, since we're kind of running up at the end of time, I wanted to open the floor back to our panelists to kind of offer any, this wasn't on the prepared remarks, but offering any sort of kind of conclusions, things that you've heard from the conversation that you think we can kind of move forward with, or just from your perspective, any final things you want to say.
I'll say, Jeffrey, that I'm just so grateful to be here with you and Bethany and Iyana and my Gwynedd Mercy family. I love talking about hard issues, hard conversations. I think that's the only way that we can move forward, is if we have honest conversations about who we are, where we're at, and where we want to be. And please vote. Please make a plan to vote this year. It's very important. I know, traditionally, especially Black voters, I know in my family, are just very disillusioned about it. And they're not sure whether or not it actually makes a difference in the end. And I'm here to tell you that it absolutely does. So please, please, whatever you need to do, call me. I'll drive you with masks on. I don't care. But, please get your voice heard, and please vote this November.
Thanks, Candace.
I would recommend being generous and gentle with yourself in this process, becoming an ally of working towards anti-racism, and in the broader spectrum. So I'll just say over, I guess, the end of August, I took the opportunity to go visit my family in upstate New York, which is where I'm from. And very soon after I arrived, my father, who's turning 65 and who has not experienced a lot of diversity in his life, mentioned that he had recently heard a statistic about the number of trans youth who attempted suicide. And he was saying it kind of in this way that I was just frustrated, because I've been trying to talk to my parents for 15 years about some of their attitudes towards particularly LGBTQ identifying folks. And it turned out that it's his coworker's child who is transitioning, and now it's personal, right? And so in my, I hate this term, but in my wokeness, right, I'm like discrediting my father, like, Dad, everyone knows this statistic. And I just, I was so disappointed in myself and in my own journey to say, he's where I was 15 years ago, right? But it's personal now because of that authentic relationship, because he's watching his coworker try to access healthcare services for a transition, and now it's very real. And so I think, I'm here talking to you about it, but I don't have this right yet, you know, and I don't think we will, because I think things continue to change. So being generous and gentle with yourself and generous with others. You know, people are angry. If they're angry and hurting, you can't put your stuff on them, right? And so if someone's angry and hurting and you're trying to be an ally, just be gentle and step back. And so, you know, sometimes it's us stepping back or off to the side. But I think, yeah, being generous and being gentle are both really important things in this work.
Thank you. And yeah, both of you, thank you so much. And then Iyana, you get the last word. Well, the last panelist word, and then I'm just going to tie us all together with something.
Great. What I wanted to say is this is like the first step, and I'm glad to see as many people is here, especially like staff and stuff like that. I really appreciate you guys being here, because it's just being able to speak my piece and speak what I've seen in a safe environment is a good first step. I'm glad that Gwen and Mercy is making the initiative to get things done and to hear people's voices and to actually do something about it. So I really appreciate everybody being here. And like Bethany said, like this is uncomfortable. And like Jeff said, everybody's not going to be a perfect ally. So you are going to make mistakes, but putting your foot forward is the best. That's the best part. You're trying. You see the effort rather than just sitting there and not doing anything at all. So I just want to say thank you to everybody, and to also please, please, please educate yourself. Like, please educate yourself. Do not believe everything that you see on Facebook with Uncle Betty and all that. Don't believe it. You need to do your own research and to actually provide yourself with the exact information. And that's it.
Excellent. Well, thanks so much, all three of you. From where you are, if you can just do a little round of applause to them. I really appreciate everyone being on. And before we go, I wanted to share something that was said during our July vigil, that it's a statement that was put together by this group of people, including Candace and Iyana, about being anti-racist at GMercyU. And we talked about saying it earlier, but Bethany made the great insight that it sounded a little bit more like a sending forth. And so I'm going to read that now. And then after I read that, everyone's free to go. But I want to stay with the panelists a little bit longer, because there's one more question that came in that I'd love to get your opinion on. But before that, let's get back in that kind of silent mode that we started with. Inviting back the spirit of Breonna and George Floyd, Daniel Prude, and really, you know, our founders, Catherine McCauley, who really spent her life reaching out to communities that were misunderstood, that were looked down upon for one reason or another by society, but tried to do her best to lift them up. So let's just sit in that moment, and I'll read the statement. As a member of the Gwen and Mercy University community, I acknowledge that racism stands in direct contradiction of our community's mission, which is rooted in the tradition of the Sisters of Mercy. I will open my eyes to the ways that Black, Brown, Indigenous, and all students, faculty, or staff of color on campus may feel uncomfortable, unwelcome, or silenced. I will open my ears to be attentive to the stories and experiences of Black, Brown, Indigenous, and all students, faculty, or staff of color on campus. I will open my mouth to speak honestly about how our campus and all facets of society in the United States were constructed, consciously or unconsciously, on social systems that benefit white people at the cost of denying Black, Brown, Indigenous, and all people of color equal rights and access to these benefits, especially freedom and life. I will open my mind to believe that these actions I will take on campus to remain aware, attentive, and honest will lay the foundation for a space that is anti-racist. Finally, I will open my heart to embody the selfless love of Catherine McCauley, whose life of encountering and accompanying the vulnerable and marginalized communities serves as a prime example of how I can ensure Black Lives Matter at Gwynedd Mercy University, in our nation, and around the world. All right, everyone. Well, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate your time, getting you out a little bit earlier, but tomorrow, just to give people an update on where we're going with Mercy Week next, tomorrow is Mercy Week Mass. It's going to be live streamed. If you'd like to join, you can find that live stream link on the Mercy Week webpage, or for those of you who might be first year students or students on Griffin Engage. And then Friday is our virtual Mercy Tea and Authors. There have, from what I've heard, been 30 recipes for baked goods that have been compiled that you can bake at home and bring with you to a virtual celebration of our authors on campus, with some tea as well. So thank you, everyone, for coming. I am going to stick around with the panelists just to kind of get their responses on the last question, but feel free to head out, everyone else. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thanks, everybody.
Take care.
Thank you so much for coming. I'm so glad you came.
So, you know, if this person says, I am a biracial woman, Black and white, and sometimes feel stuck in the middle, feeling like I have to pick a side. Like I'm not Black enough and haven't gone through what other Black women go through to advocate for the Black community. And I'm not white enough to say I need to take a stand in the white community and bring about change. What could someone like me do to bring awareness when I don't know what side or position to play?
That's a difficult question. And that's honestly, I've lived that question to some extent, because when you're Black and you grow up in a predominantly white community, you aren't necessarily accepted by people who've grown up in Black communities. Your dialect might be different. The things that you like, the music that you listen to, the cultures that you listen to, it all might be different from what people that have grown up in Black culture have traditionally been exposed to. So what I would say is that you really have to come at it from an individual perspective. You really shouldn't just look for just picking a Black or a white side to this issue. Who are you and what you have to offer are the two main facets of becoming a great ally. So you're going to be caught in the middle, and I think it's mostly a social conversation, and it's whether or not you want to be pulled in those two directions, or whether or not you're going to say, just stand your ground right in the middle, be who you are, and trust that what you have to offer is universal. It doesn't have to belong to white or Black culture. It can benefit everybody.
Yeah. And just to interject and say, I hear that because, well, I hear that, and again, going back to the art piece, like I love the show Insecure a lot. I think it's such a good show. And the way in which Issa Rae has talked about Insecure is that I write it for Black people, but its themes should transcend, you know, it should be universal. They should connect with everyone. And I think what you're saying there is something similar, you know, that whatever you stand for, make sure it's bigger than just this binary, I think, Bethany, you said, of
Absolutely.
Black versus white, you know. So yeah, so I just wanted to throw that in. But other panelists, you all are more the experts than me.
I mean, that's just such a unique, you know, like Candace said, like that's just really personal. And I think similar to if someone is adopted, or, you know, like they have to find that path, right? Like you might do the history, and you might, you know, spend time really immersing yourself in Black culture if you weren't exposed to it growing up, and you know, really find yourself there, or not, you know. And so I would just want to be alongside, you know, and support the person, but I don't know if I have any advice.
From what I can hear, like I always heard the term, like I have friends who are mixed and biracial as well, and it's always, I'm too white for the Black kids, but I'm too Black for the white kids. And like how I see it is that the color shouldn't matter. You shouldn't matter that I'm half Black and I'm half white. It should matter of me being a decent person and teaching people the right thing to do. So it shouldn't matter like, oh, do I need to advocate for Black people? no, just advocate for people who are suffering and pain, regardless of the race or anything. Do the right thing because it's the right thing. It shouldn't matter of your skin color. Just be a good person.
Mm. Yeah. No, that's a great way to put it.
And I was just gonna say, and maybe that extra vulnerability, right? Of, I would imagine that person has seen and heard things from white people that white people didn't know you were in the room, right? So like, I'm in all these multilingual spaces and people assume you don't speak a particular language and talk, say something. And then that person's like, yo, I speak English. I'm right here. I heard what you said. Like, that was horrible. So I would think too, that you just want to, again, just be gentle with yourself. Like, I would imagine some of the dissonance is not wanting to have to feel that way anymore, right? And not wanting to have to be in, verbally violent spaces with white people, experiencing microaggressions, but not knowing if they should say something or not, right? Because of that challenge. So